Former Australian Treasurer and Ambassador to the United States, Joe Hockey, recently made a pretty bold, highly provocative claim. The nation is currently sleepwalking into the future. It's a really striking image, right? A whole country just moving forward with its eyes effectively closed, completely unaware of this compounding series of economic and technological transitions that are about to hit us all at once. So what we're going to do in today's Explainer is unpack the exact warnings he laid out. We'll be looking closely at how several massive global shifts are literally colliding as we speak. To really grasp this warning, we have to look at this tangled web of interconnected challenges. And we're not just talking about abstract economic theories here, no. We are looking at the real-world collision of taxation policy, massive welfare burdens, the explosive rise of AI, and even the geopolitical realities of defense manufacturing. It is a fascinating, if somewhat alarming, look at how the policy decisions we make today are going to heavily ripple into tomorrow. Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We're breaking this down into 5 key areas: political discontent, the capital tax dilemma, welfare and shrinking income, AI and mass unemployment, and finally, submarines and production shortages. Let's jump right into Section 1, Symptoms of Political Discontent. Before we dive into the complex economic machinery, we really have to look at the immediate symptom of public frustration. Recent polling shows the right-wing populist party One Nation surging to 31%, actually pulling ahead of the traditional conservative coalition, which sits at 20%. Now, rather than treating this like some isolated local glitch, Hockey attributes this surge to a highly predictable global anti-establishment anger. It's essentially the exact same sentiment, a loud demand that leaders actually listen, and a total rejection of business as usual that's fueled similar political movements across Europe, the UK, and the US in recent years. All right, moving on to Section 2, the capital tax dilemma. Beneath all that voter frustration, there are structural economic causes at play. Specifically, we need to look at how a country's tax policy fundamentally shapes human behavior. According to the analysis, there's a deep flaw in how investment incentives are aligned right now. Hockey argues that taxing capital gains on shares equally to capital gains on property creates a severely skewed incentive. Think about it like this. If you have $500,000, it's vastly safer to park that money in dormant residential real estate, a house in a regular suburb. It just sits there. But if you risk that exact same money on a startup, well, that business actually employs people, it buys equipment, it drives the economy forward, and yet the current system taxes that risky, job-creating investment at the exact same rate as the safe, dormant one. And this dynamic creates a massive flight risk on an international level. An entrepreneur in Australia faces the prospect of giving nearly half of their hard-earned success straight back to the government. Meanwhile, right next door, New Zealand's finance minister is actively pitching a zero-tax environment on capital gains to lure away that exact same startup talent. If you're an innovator, you really have to ask yourself, why take a huge risk in a high-tax environment when you're actively being courted by a neighbor who's offering to let you actually keep what you build? Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, welfare and shrinking income. This loss of economic innovation doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It ties directly into a stark warning from the Treasury regarding a rapidly shrinking fiscal runway. Hockey points out that Australia is fast approaching a very dangerous fiscal tipping point, one that's actually already been breached by the UK, France, and Japan. In those countries, every single dollar of personal income tax collected by the government is entirely consumed by the welfare bill. Every dollar. And Australia is nearly at that exact point, where the entire personal income tax base pays for absolutely nothing but welfare. So, what does this mean in practice? Well, it's pretty alarming. It means the taxes taken out of your paycheck are no longer enough to build roads, fund hospitals, or equip the military. Because personal income tax is swallowed whole by welfare spending, governments are basically being backed into a corner. They're being forced to find and raise entirely new taxes just to pay for the basic, essential services of a functioning state, like health, education, and defense. That money has to come from somewhere, right? Next up is Section 4, AI and mass unemployment. Now finding that new tax revenue is about to become much, much harder, thanks to a looming technological threat that could drastically shrink the human workforce as we know it. Drawing on his time in the US, Hockey paints a really vivid picture. He describes stepping out of an airport in Washington, D.C. and seeing driverless Teslas navigating parking lots entirely on their own. But the threat isn't just to drivers or blue-collar workers, it's coming straight for the white-collar sector. Because AI makes comprehensive knowledge effectively free and instantaneous, young people entering prestigious professions like law, accounting, and even medicine are facing unprecedented roadblocks. A junior lawyer's research can now be done in seconds by software. Add to this the robotics revolution replacing human beings on the production line, and you've got a perfect storm.
And the craziest part? This disruption operates on a shockingly aggressive timeline. We are not talking about science fiction decades from now. Hockey predicts massive structural technological disruption hitting the labor market within just the next 3 to 4 years.
Based on today's participation rates, he estimates this combined AI and robotics revolution will drive unemployment up to a staggering 15%. Just visualize what that actually looks like. Millions of people unexpectedly out of work in the span of just a few years. This triggers a seriously vicious economic cycle. Here's how it plays out. Step 1. AI causes these massive job losses. Step 2. Tech leaders like Elon Musk push for a universal basic wage to support the displaced masses. But step 3 is the kicker. With a shrinking pool of income taxpayers and a massive growing demand for welfare, governments will have absolutely no choice but to implement aggressive new taxes on capital. Hockey warns this means we'll likely see a strong push for taxes on the family home, new death taxes, and heavy levies on assets, simply because the traditional income tax base won't exist anymore. Now let's pivot to Section 5, submarines and production shortages. In sharp, almost unbelievable contrast to this high-tech, automated, AI-driven future we were just talking about, the geopolitical reality of modern defense manufacturing tells a completely different story. Get this number, 90%. Despite all our modern AI and automation, 90% of an American Virginia-class nuclear submarine is actually built by human hand. Hockey points out a profound geopolitical irony here. The United States is experiencing an unprecedented technology boom, right? Yet they have a severe shortage of human hands available to build these critical defense assets. There's this massive gridlock in submarine production because they literally cannot find enough workers. And this human labor shortage is the exact reason why Australia will be receiving second-hand vessels rather than newly built ones. The tech might be absolutely cutting edge, but the bottleneck? It's entirely human. Finally, let's look at our last section, the ultimate solution. Bringing all these threads together, the voter anger, the misaligned tax incentives, the massive AI disruption, and these geopolitical supply chains, the source material ultimately points to one essential survival mechanism: grassroots innovation. Hockey emphasizes a critical reality here. You just can't rely on young entrepreneurs to generate world-changing ideas if government policy actively penalizes them for taking risks. The nation desperately needs that kid in a garage to build a company that solves these massive productivity issues. But why would they even try if they're instantly suffocated by red tape and then slapped with a 50% tax if they somehow manage to succeed? The ultimate argument here is that punishing innovation with heavy taxation is a disastrous policy, especially when innovation is quite literally the only way out. So, this is the big question we're left to ponder today. We've seen the data, we know the structural hurdles, and we can all see the looming technological wave. Will structural reforms be implemented in time to empower enough innovation to save the economy? Or are we truly, as the warning goes, just sleepwalking into the future? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.